A warm welcome to another edition of the Magpie Circle, and it's a very special guest we've got this week for us. Many of us will remember Darren Ward, player of the season, member of the Sam Allardyce Championship winning season, 6 years in total at Notts County. A very warm welcome and thank you very much indeed for joining us, Darren.
Nice one, thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's get cracking, because I think in your 6 years, we often talk in football about highs and lows. And I think you certainly had a few of those in your time, from winning the record-breaking season, relegation early on, losing in a playoff final, winning an international cap for Wales. So you crammed an awful lot in your 6 years. Local boy from Worksop, you joined us from Mansfield. So in you come. What's your thoughts going through when you walk through the doors at Meadow Lane?
I think obviously there was a step up in the division, so I wanted to prove myself first and foremost. But I think really the enormity of the dressing room, the characters that were in there, because obviously the management duo of Steve and Colin that had come in, they've gone about sifting out some of, shall we say, the older pros or some of the professionals that were earning a lot of money. And I think the club was starting to cut the cloth accordingly. So who was out there? So Nigel Jempson, I'm going to say Brucey, so Mickey Forsyth. There were lots of big characters, senior professionals who've been around the block. And obviously there was like this, I want to call it a bomb squad really. There was alienated from training with the team or with the squad that was on match day duties. And it was really, the dressing room was really difficult because you had their own. I remember Brucey, he would bring his own pack up in. It was, obviously, sometimes there was food provided after training, nutrition and bits and pieces started to filter in. But I remember him, he had his flask, of tea, and he had his sandwich box, and he used to offer his sausage rolls around the dressing room, and little things like that. So I think from that point of view, it was a little bit tough because I was fresh face, 21,
yeah,
and it was just a different environment for me, but one that I was eager to try and stamp my sort of presence on as a young goalkeeper. Obviously, we all have as sort of faith in your own ability, but at times when you sort of see these players, I mean, Gemmo had been over the Trent at Forest and made a name for himself, and all them little bits and pieces. I think Stevie Nicol was still floating around. So obviously Liverpool legends, and just to sit in the dressing room and listen to their stories and just the way they went and conducted themselves, even if they weren't playing so much. I mean, Chrissy Marsden, Mazza was still floating around, and obviously he went on to bigger and better things, shall we say, at Southampton. And there were some really good players. So just the way they conducted themselves in that time where it would have been easy for them, as already been cast aside, to down tools really. But just the way they kept the spirits up, and that sort of close knit sort of community within a dressing room, it was a real eye opener for me. But obviously the nitty gritty of football starts, and you want to get down to business. You want to hit the ground running. You want to have a good pre-season. You just want to make a good impression, and I was no different to anybody else really.
As a young keeper, as you've said there, Notts, Steve Cherry had moved on in that summer, I believe. He was, quite an institution at Notts. Been regular first team goalkeeper for many years. So in comes a younger player. Did you feel much pressure on you that season or not?
No, none whatsoever. Only what you put on yourself. I think I've always been driven. Always have ambition to strive to be the best I can be, and it's not something. It's easier to look back on now than possibly in that moment. But we all hear the little phrases of control the controllables and all the bits and pieces. So it's not something that, I mean, he was gone. I never really crossed paths with him unless we played in a county cup game previously for Mansfield, and you play Notts or Forest in what inevitably was always the final. But it was one of them, ships passing the night really. We never really interacted. We didn't know each other too well personally, although we would, you know, stand and have a conversation if we bumped into each other. But yeah, we both moved on. I was now in a new place of employment. I just wanted to prove myself and give it a good shot. And Steve had obviously moved on. So no, it was never like thrust into view for me, and it was never an issue.
First season, you end up going to Wembley. Was that your first time at Wembley?
Yeah.
What was that like? It's great to get there, but playoffs really at Wembley. And I was with Leicester on several occasions, 4 of them, I think. It's not a great place to lose, is it? In fact, it's a terrible place to lose.
Well, I'll tell a lie. I think I went to watch an S for England international.
Oh, the schoolboys.
School trip. Yeah, I think everybody did that as a kid growing up. But obviously to experience the feel of walking out the tunnel, the dressing rooms, thinking, all them cup finals, all them magic moments, World Cup finals, you know, and then all of a sudden you're walking out of that tunnel. I remember going across the Greyhound track and the sort of like the sandy, I'm going to call it like a disc where the track sort of behind the goal as it straightened off the grass, and across the grass. And of course you see your family over in the stand, because you kind of get an idea where the family comps are going, and you pick your family out. And that, I'm going to say, was really emotional, to be honest, because, you know, you don't often get that moment. And just to acknowledge, I'm going to say, the journey from where you've come from to that moment, and then all of a sudden the enormity of that situation. It's a one-off playoff final. And I remember Colin Murphy and Steve Thompson saying about the opportunity, don't let it pass, and how does that look in your world? And for me, it was, you know, play the game and not the occasion. But I think it's really easy to say that, because the occasion is massive. As I just said, just them moments, them spine-tingling moments. And of course, when it doesn't go right, and you're on the 2-0 defeat, and all that goes with it, you feel as though, if I remember rightly, you finished possibly 15, 16 points in front of Bradford, but because of the playoffs and the way it unfolds, you think, well, we deserve to go up, but, you know, it goes out the window. It's a one-off cup tie. It's a playoff final. It's exactly what it is. And it was desperate, really, towards the end. We were chasing it to the point that at the tunnel end, I remember doing a Cruyff turn, and Mark Stallard, playing for Bradford, hacked me down on the penalty spot. And for that split moment that I'm waiting for the referee to blow the whistle, I'm thinking, what on earth are you doing? But it becomes desperate. You know, you're chasing, you put yourself in that cul-de-sac, and you make rash decisions under pressure. So, enormous learning curve, but still a great memory, because even now, and you see little bits on the television, and there's been a lot of games at Wembley recently where the Spurs have used it as a home venue, or all the cup finals. And then there's always that moment where the nostalgic sort of credits before it, leading up to it, and show the twin towers of the old ground, and you think, I've played there. But you'd rather win there, of course. So brilliant occasion, but obviously not great memories.
Okay, so clearly a big learning curve ending at Wembley in the first season. The second season, I guess you learned a lot again, but perhaps for different reasons, ending up in relegation, change of manager.
Yeah, really, really tough, because everyone talks about these second season syndromes, and however that looks at that given time. And I think for us, we got off to a poor start and never really sort of found our feet. Managerial change, you say, and I remember being out of the team. Mike Pollitt, a good friend of mine now, Polly, but he got in the team, rightly so. We tried to find an answer, trying to find a solution to get things right, and win football matches to survive. And I wasn't a part of that. And I remember I'd just actually got a new agent. Previously, I'd always kind of used the PFA that branched out and had a kind of agency and the financial bracket and arm to the union. And I'd just left him. I'd got a new agent, and the agent probably gave me some of the best advice. I hated it. He said, hold on a minute. Wait a minute. He says, you're asking me to potentially engineer you a move when you can't even get in a team that looks like it's about to be relegated into the lowest tier of English football. He said, you need to start looking in the mirror, put your ideas up, roll your sleeves up, and start working a little bit harder. And yeah, I think that again, it's massive learning curves, still quite young, relatively speaking, and I've got agents not wanting to help me. That's how it felt at the time. I'm out of the team, surely they can help me. What's happening? And of course you get this advice and you sort of frown upon it at the time, but you know, it was wonderful advice, but obviously it wasn't a successful season.
I'm not sure these days so many agents will be handing that advice out. I mean, I'd not heard that story, and it's very different to how a lot of us would imagine agents would be managing their players.
Yeah, well, of course, moves for agents means getting paid. So, you know, yeah, it goes without saying that you'd imagine it goes hand in hand, that if a player's crying for help and sticking his hands up, that they do all that they can to rock the boat, to influence the manager or the owner, the CEOs or whatever. But no, he sort of dumped me back on my backside and said, get on with it. And it was tough to take at the time. I didn't like it, and we clashed. And you're thinking, I want to build these relationships with these people. These are going to probably help sort of guide me and develop me as a goalkeeper and as a professional footballer, and ultimately guide me through the perils and pitfalls of sort of finances and pensions, and do you do this, do you do that, and where do you... And all of a sudden he's saying, just get on with it. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I need him in my corner if he's not going to be fighting for me. But fantastic advice. And yeah, I think another lesson learned.
So there's the change of manager, Big Sam comes in. Now, there wasn't that instant turnaround when Sam came in. It was kind of like trying to turn the Titanic almost, wasn't it? And it wasn't for turning that season. Yeah?
That's correct.
But one thing, just before we move into that championship season, hey, I've got to ask you this, and you need to be careful. I promise we won't send him the video. You had someone at right back, didn't you? Chris Wilder.
Yeah.
Unbelievable manager at Sheffield United. Yeah, manager of the year for many people, last, you know, other than given what Jurgen achieved at Liverpool. But pound for pound, using boxing parlance, I think most people would say Chris Wilder, manager of the year. Did you get to know him well then? I mean, what was he like? Did you see a manager in him? I mean, what was it like?
Well, I've got to be careful because I'm part of his backroom staff at Sheffield United. So I think there was a travelling school from Sheffield. So Tony Garner, Battersby and Jonah, Gary Jones. So they used to come, Sheffield and Doncaster used to get together on whatever junction of the M1 and travel down as a little group. So obviously coming from Worksop, slightly different route. So rather than going motorway, a 614 and what have you. So never really travelled together. But I remember him having, I think it was a Golf GTI convertible. And I'm thinking, he's come from Sheffield United, they've got a bit of dough, like, you know. I'm going to say he was always genuine, hard-working, professional, but Jack the lad, he was really experienced. He had that South Yorkshire grit and determination, but he had that cheekiness about him as well. So he was great in the dressing room. He was a leader. He was driven, and obviously he was a decent right back as well.
He didn't drop any short back passes into you then?
Well, not so short. He probably just rattled them in and bounced them in and put them on my left foot. So no, I've got to say, over the years since Chris left, and obviously I carried on playing, and Chris Rotherham and bits and pieces, and then of course he went into management and the Halifax and the Oxfords and Northamptons and bits and pieces, and obviously I was already at Sheffield United as the goalkeeping coach when Chris and Alan, and along with Matt Prestridge as well, all came in from Northampton, and of course there's been a little bit of a revolving door of managers recently at Sheffield United, all trying to get them out of the League One as we were at the time. And so from Danny Wilson, that first gave me the senior job, obviously thinking back now, Davy Weir, Nigel Clough, Nigel Adkins, and obviously Chris has come in. So I've managed a little black box really from the aeroplane. I've managed to survive all these departures. So anyway, cut a long story short, Chris came in and suggested that there's no reason to change the position. Obviously, we had a history of playing together, so he knew me as a person, my character. Obviously, he'd never really seen me work and doing my stuff out on the training pitch with the goalkeepers. But I think first thing he said is, "I know your character, and that's so important to me." And I think looking now at the teams, I'm going to say the recruitment profiling, if you like, in terms of the characters, they've had to be character first, and then the quality comes afterwards. So in terms of the Sheffield, South Yorkshire grit and determined, roll your sleeves up, have a laugh and a smile about it. But when you're working hard. Always a time for a social scene, because that creates the spirit, but also a time for knowing when you've got to do your job. So the balance is struck over the 3 or 4 years that he's been at the football club with us now, has been incredible. And of course, the meteoric rise that the team has had up to finish 9th in the Premier League last season was incredible. So Chris, he manages now probably as he played and how he was in the dressing room. Pulls no punches, tells it how it is. He rocked up, he did his job, and he did it to the best of his ability.
I think it's a model way that Chris has gone about rebuilding Sheffield United, and a lot of it, I don't know personally from what you're saying there, the traditional values, aren't they? Clearly there is now a huge number of people with sports science, data analysts, video analysts. Absolutely right. You should apply modern science. But you still need traditional values and traditional approach, man management, quality recruitment. And I think certainly that's some of the challenges, not sort of historically faced over, not the last couple of seasons, which has led to relegation, but probably over a decade or more in terms of the number of managers, the number of players signed without being watched properly, players signed only off video, all of those sorts of things. Traditional values, for me, I still don't think there is a replacement for them.
No, I think it underpins everything that Chris stands for. And I think it is true. I think, as I said, reflecting on the team, the characters that have come through the door, they've been men, they've been leaders, they've been genuine people, grounded, unbelievable background. Some of the players, when you think of some of the players that are playing in the Premier League in our team, one of them used to work in McDonald's, So to have that sort of grounding and to have that drive and to be successful on the back of it, but not rest on your laurels, to keep striving, and gone from playing at these levels to go League One, Championship, Premier League, and Premier League again this season. It's a credit to the manager and the way you rightly said. I think Chris, he thrives on managing situations. That's not to take anything away from the tactical nous or the stuff we do out on the grass, but he loves managing. He loves managing people. He loves managing situations. And I think for me, he's the best in the business.
Completely agree. Let's move on to a good season. I presume the highlight of your time at Notts County, the Championship season under Sam. So there had been maybe you're going to tell me different, but there had been little indication of what was to come in the first few weeks of Sam's reign at the end of the team going down compared to how they came out the traps. What changed?
Oh, I think the break. I think the break helped. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but am I right in thinking maybe up to 20 games or so before we got a result under Sam? I'm not sure the numbers.
Yeah, you added them in at the end of the previous.
Yes, from the previous season. So obviously we come in, he sets his stall out, maybe a couple of fresh faces, but I think the beauty of that team is that, and again, you talk about leaders. We had leaders in the team. We had a strong spine to the team, and I'm going to say the simplicity of how we did what we did was so easy to follow. And because we had, I'm going to say, relatively speaking, good players to do it at that level, there was no reason why that would ever fail. So I think when you think about the defenders, obviously Strods came in at the same day as I did the previous years. We had a medical on the same day. You got Gary Strodder, and then you've got, you know, I would say in that team was possibly Robbo, Rico, Sean Farrell, Gary Jones. You know, they were good at that level. They were really good players at that level, and because of the simplicity, playing in effective areas of the pitch, it might have been a little bit direct onto Big Fazza from time to time, but you had some flair off of that. Dennis Pearce with his left foot. You had Ian Barraclough, who went on to play at a high level with Queen's Park Rangers. You've got Ian Hendon. You've got Mark Robson. You've got Andy Hughes as energy. You've got Stevie Finnan. All these people that you come across, and they've had wonderful careers. They were just a good bunch, and I think the simplicity in the way that Sam set us up to be defensively sound and play in good areas of the football pitch, and then allow the players to play and have that. It definitely gave us the license to be. How can I put it? We could go and express ourselves. So you know, yes, we know how we wanted to go about it and get it from A to B. But when we got to B, we had the license to do what we needed to do, and I think that creativity. Obviously, I think Jonah got the golden boot that year, or he was up there. The incident at Lincoln when Faz went off him, he was devastated that day when I think they charged the goalkeeper down and Faz nicked it off him from a yard out. He was devastated. I remember him almost walking back to the halfway for the kickoff. I remember giggling at the other end after I'd missed one that I'd kicked. My right leg was still over the top of the spire in Lincoln. But there we go. Yeah, happy memories.
That team had strong characters, and you just mentioned a name there, and you know, for the younger people, they probably find it quite difficult to believe, and it's a subject or question that's often asked, isn't it? What players won Division 4, Division 3, Division 2, Division 1, Premier League, European Cup? Steve Finnan. What was Steve like?
Witty. Really dry and witty, but unassuming, really quiet, went about his business, didn't interfere with anybody else's business. I think Colin Murphy must have brought him. Am I right? I think Colin Murphy might have brought him.
Was Colin.
Was it?
Yeah.
I think we saw him as a right winger or a right side midfielder. And obviously in his career he ended up at Liverpool and was it Fulham? He ended up at right back and but Finns was exceptionally talented, but never complicated things. The simplicity was just genius, really. Obviously, predominantly right-footed, so he wouldn't be going on a mazy and end up on the inside left channel. But he plays position, but he was solid and dependable. And as I say, the simplicity of it. Obviously, we all know Brian Clough's sort of comments and the way he thought football should have played. Finns could do that. It was just so elegant, and I remember somebody saying to me, "Excellence is simplicity done well," and he was excellent.
It's interesting because reclusive is the wrong word, but he was very, very quiet at Liverpool. I think he hardly ever did an interview in however many years it was, and then he's kind of disappeared a little from the football scene for several years. But you're saying there he was quite witty in the dressing room and he had his own character. And
yeah, without a doubt. I mean, he got on really well with Andy Hughes. I know they become quite pally, but to be pally with Hughesy, you need to give as good as you get. So I think I've just spoke to him earlier. Actually,
he's on the other side of Sheffield, isn't he, and the coaching staff there?
Well, he's been with our under-23s, and he had the opportunity to jump ship and go across the road to the dark side. And, so
you'd know all about that. You'd know all about that going to the dark side. We'll come to that in a minute.
Yeah, well, Mansfield Town might think that as well. So there we go. Yeah. No, I think Finns, going back to Finns, as I say, really unassuming, but a genuinely nice guy, really, really great character. And as I say, had that witty charm about him, and he always had a smile on his face. A really genuine fella. You talk about underpinning them values. He's one of them that you'd have in your trenches with you because you knew you could trust him.
Very interesting. My son's desperate for me to get him on as a guest on air. And I said, it's easier said than done because he only did one interview for Liverpool in about 8 years. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see. Big Sam. So you've moved into coaching now. What was Sam like? I mean, he has this persona of a big, domineering man that you don't mess with. He's also, I believe, from talking from some of your other teammates in previous shows, he was responsible then as sports science was coming in, wasn't he? He had you on the creatine and those sorts of things. What was he like?
Yeah, I think we all recognise it. Well, a lot of us, the older generation, might remember him and recall him as being an uncompromising centre-half.
Him and Paul Jones at Bolton. Yeah.
Yes. I'm probably going to suggest he managed that way, especially at the beginning, because it was almost, he coached, or probably when you're setting your stall out, you kind of coach in a command style. So you're telling people exactly what you want and how you want it done. I think he set his stall out, and I think that echoed in and reflected in the way we played. So beyond that, though, again, going back to Chris now at Sheffield United, them sort of interpersonal skills he had. Again, a time to recognise when to let your hair down and when to enjoy a beer and each other's company, and when he needed to run us or drill us or discipline us. There was always, he got the balance right.
It was very much one for all for one, wasn't it, with him? Everybody had to do everything together.
Yes. Well, nights out. I remember
that's what I'm alluding to. Yeah,
he was all for a beer, but it was all in. And I think even when you consider club functions, it was always with your partner. Always with your partner. So when you'd come and have in one of the suites upstairs in the main stand there, the group was brilliant. It was incredible, so tight knit. So yeah, nights out with the players, it would be, we're out tonight, and nobody leaves before me. And you know we'd be there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we would all be stumbling out and going our separate ways. But a great leader and a sense of spirit amongst the group under Sam.
Yeah, I remember used to do some work with the League Managers Association on the PR side, and their annual dinner, which was always down at Lancaster Gate, big event. Sam was always the last person standing. And there were occasions, I mean, I'd long gone to bed because I'm not a big drinker. He went through till 6 a.m, having started at about 3 o'clock in the previous afternoon. And he didn't look too much the worse for wear, to be honest.
I've got to say, not everybody could keep up with that pace. Yeah, so again, another learning curve, very steep at times, but it's part of the process. It's part of the process of being involved in them circles. So, no, all good.
Yeah, it's interesting about the all for one for all. When I was at Leicester, I'd sometimes be tasked with organising, social secretary events, and Martin O'Neill wanted us all to play golf. So I had to go and find a golf course, for 36 players, coaching staff or whatever. So I do that. And then, Emil Heskey, who was 17 years old at the time, never picked a golf club up in his life. Not even on a putting green. And Martin said, everyone's going to play golf. We'll sort you out clubs. And Emil had to come along. He just played the 9 holes. But everybody was made to do it because this was a team bonding exercise and getting everybody, some people out of the comfort zone, others would enjoy it, but getting the communal group together. And I pick up from you and from others, Sam's approach was very similar to that.
Yeah. Well, I think we had a golf day. I think we had maybe an overnight stay somewhere. I think Mr. Pavis had I can't remember exactly the scenario, but I remember the golf, and I remember a lot of people playing. And I've got to say, I enjoyed playing golf at the time. I could swing a club, but there were people that couldn't.
Yeah.
And of course, the golf balls go up, and right, you're partnered with him. You're in that 2-ball. You're playing against that. Oh my goodness, the first tee nerves are incredible. So just for that moment alone, and irrespective of whether you win or whether you're rubbish or whether you're brilliant, that moment on that first tee, because everybody's going off in order and everybody's seeing each other off. Yeah. And of course, there's a couple that didn't get past the yellow tees. Never mind getting onto the fairway. So, of course, the banter and them moments are golden.
So, we started the season. At what point did you think, hang on a minute here, we could be in for a very special season? Was it from the first game? Did it take a few games? When did it start to click that we're in business here?
I think quite quickly you get a feel for things. And I think it's dead easy to not look at the table, the league standings, until you maybe 6-8 games in, because all of a sudden people are finding their feet, and of course you think, 10, 12 games in, you're a quarter of the way through a season. So a sort of 6 and 8 games, you're thinking, let's have a look around. And was it Peterborough might have been up there?
Yeah.
There might have been another team as well. Anyway, yeah, you sort of, we're doing all right, and then you're looking at other teams' results, and they've picked up another result for them, and then I tell you what, we're all right though, aren't we? So all of a sudden, and then I remember we won, I think it was maybe 10 on the spin, because it was almost in the blink of an eye, and I don't know whether the games went Saturday, Tuesday, or the condensed period where you play some games, but all of a sudden I'm thinking, we've just racked up 30 points. And it was literally in a heartbeat. And at that point, you're thinking, it's almost like a runaway train. That momentum is golden. And even when you're not playing so well, or as a misplaced pass, it might ricochet into you just get away with things. And when you get the rub of the green or lady luck, however you want to, dress it up, that momentum is golden, absolutely golden. And I think it might have been Macclesfield at home right towards the end of the season. I think on that day, maybe Macclesfield got relegated. And even to this day, I can't believe what happened, but I'm absolutely certain that they scored the first goal on that day. They had a header, and at Meadow Lane, that the goals, the way they were strung up at the back, it hit the post that was holding the cords that give the net tension. Yeah. Yes. So it went in the goal.
Yeah.
It was a goal. It hit the stanchion, the tension, the pole, and came back out into my hands. And they started kind of celebrating, but the referee's angle was that he didn't know whether it was that side of the post or in the goal side of the post. So the ball comes back to me, and he's not done it. Well, I whipped it on the floor and smashed a goal kick as fast as I could up the pitch, and he's play on. And I'm like, we've got away with it. But just them moments, from should have been 1-0 down. And I know you look at Macclesfield and whether I was wrong in doing what I did, or that professional element of, say, winning and them environments, or you're just rolling on that crest of a wave there. But just things go for you. And I think we had things going for us. I remember going to Torquay. We got absolutely battered, and we win 2-0. And we're coming out on the bus, and you're thinking, how has that happened? It's just little moments, but it was always such a positive environment, and it just snowballed. But I think going back to your question, it's quite early. You pick up, you get a feel for things, and it went really well.
At end of the season, you've broke countless records, won it at the canter. Presumably, it was a good party.
I can't remember it. Yeah, no. Again, I remember. I go back to a function at the stadium in one of the suites, and going back to Big Sam. I remember him dancing with my mum and dad on top of a table, and my mum still recalls it now. What about Sam when he, it was just golden. And again, the spirit, the camaraderie, the unity, the family feel to it all. It was just an incredible time.
The manner in which you won the title, I think quite a lot of people thought you would then, if you like, just carry that momentum on into the next season. But it didn't quite pan out like that, did it?
Well, it's easier said than done. I think, when you step up a division, The stakes are a little bit higher. The quality of the players, the intensity of the play, the pace of the play, and of course, it's all well and good having that momentum and that group and that unity, and it'll stand you in good stead. But it's a difficult challenge.
Alex Dyer, who was a guest a couple of weeks ago on the show, he kind of said a similar thing to you. He said perhaps, you know, some players weren't quite as good as they thought. We have to work a bit harder. Didn't quite come off. But if you fast forwarded the following season, Sam kind of got it all sorted again, didn't he? And you made a great start. But of course, Bolton were to come calling. Was it a surprise to the players, or were you kind of expecting Sam to be poached at some point?
It's probably not something I ever gave a great deal of consideration, but it was an enormous surprise. I think we all recognised that there was a story of having a letter of resignation popped under the chairman's door. And
this was after a night, because you'd all been on a night out, hadn't you? It was another one awful one.
But yeah, it was just, wow, where did that come from? How did that happen? Why did we not hear about it? Because we all know in football, especially these days, there's always, it's like Chinese whispers, really, you know, and nothing, just out of the blue, wallop, goodbye, done, finito. Well, no goodbyes. It was just, that was it. And it was like, what's happened? So enormous shock, absolutely massive shock to everybody, I think.
It's interesting because as best as we can piece all of this together from speaking with some of your colleagues, you were all out at the Astoria or whatever the club was, and Sam's out with you. No one knew, did they? No one knew. No one had an inkling.
No, they did okay though.
I mean, the story is, isn't it, that Sam went from the nightclub, pushed the letter under the chairman's door, went home. So and I think you guys had to come in the following morning a little bit later, or were told to report in, and that's when you started to hear the news, yeah?
Yeah. It's just an enormous shock, really. Leaves a little bit of an empty feeling in the pit of your stomach. But I think what we've learned is that we're involved in professional football. You know, these things happen. Managers come and go, players certainly come and go. So whoever was to come in next, you go about your business. Just like I said right at the beginning of this recording, it's you want to prove yourself again, and that means proving yourself to a new manager, maybe a new staff, a new style that you might have to adopt as you know, a tactical approach to the team. Who knows? But yeah, I'm going to say it was quite sad, really, because you know, we'd had obviously relative success together, and you all build up these relationships, and you know, it just got whipped away in a heartbeat, really. So that's football, though, and you dust yourself down and you go again.
And you proved yourself again. You got the call up, was it 2000, your first international call up for Wales, which, to say you're in the third tier of English football, to get your debut international club is no mean achievement, is it?
Well, yeah, you could say that. That's not something I would obviously.
No, but my point is, Notts County in the lower division did not have many players who would be capped while they were with the club in the bottom two divisions.
No, I appreciate that. It's obviously, even to this day, an incredibly proud sort of moment for myself and my family, and something I always look back on and be really fond memories. Met some incredibly well-known people, but good football people, and I managed to travel most of Europe, albeit carrying the skips most of the time, but to be involved and to enjoy that sort of them circles. And again, it just whets the appetite a little bit. You know, you aspire to be the best you can, and you see a lot of these players that you're interacting with playing at the top of the game. So, you know, you always want to follow them dreams.
You look back on your 5-6 years at Notts. Is there any particular one game or games where you allow yourself to reflect with pride on your own individual performance? You know, is there one where, you know, you earned your call on that day, sort of thing?
Well, I spoke about the Torquay game. I thought I did okay in that one, and I think we possibly played away at Wigan in an FA Cup. I don't know if there was a replay because I think it was on an evening game, a Tuesday night possibly, at the old, is it Springfield Park?
Springfield Park, yeah, I was there, yeah.
And I remember they had a decent team. They had a few Spaniards at the time, Roberto Martinez. So anyway, they had a sprinkling of European flavour, shall we say. And they were a good team. And I remember us nicking I think it was a 1-0 result. And I had a particularly good night that night as well. I enjoyed that game. And again, it's not see the stadiums and the pitches these days. It was far from that them dizzy heights. I mean, terrible away dressing room. It was probably up there with the worst away dressing room in my experience of football. And the pitch was like playing that with respect. It's like playing on the local rec. But to pull off a few saves that night, I think there are a couple of games that spring to mind.
Now, there's one game, I think I'm right, I might be wrong, half of the name, that sticks in my mind for just as quite a unique occasion. And you just mentioned the FA Cup. It's against Wimbledon on a Tuesday night. And Neil Ardley, the Notts manager, when I first met him off the train when he came for the job interview, we both spoke about this as one game that sticks in our memories forever because it was just such a unique game. Nothing to do with the match, and I saw very little of it, but the fog, Notts and Wimbledon. I've never seen anything like it. I cannot believe the game was ever played. What was he like to play in?
Well, there was doubt before the game, and we was walking out, and obviously it was a bit dank and dreary. And I remember the fog. Well, I was going to say rolling it off the Trent. That's someone else's song, but it was literally folding over the top of the stadium. You could see it literally falling down onto the pitch, and you're thinking no. And then all of a sudden it clears a little bit. There's a little bit of a break in it, and they think, oh, all right. And the floodlights come on, and you obviously you can see a little bit further. But of course, it's like putting full beam on when it's really foggy. It's just like it's a whiteout, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, well, I remember we kicked off, and now you said Wimbledon, I'm sure it was Kelvin Davis in goal at the other end, and I couldn't see him. I remember not being able
I can ask you, yeah.
And I was so focused, and when I say focused, I was literally looking around the halfway line just to try and see, do you know, the players going from left to right, or the depth of the team coming, and he was just playing off that. And then all of a sudden you see the goalkeeper at the other end, you see the goal frame, and it's gone again. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. But the actual focus, you know, the concentration levels of trying to read without, it's a bit of a stab in the dark, really. any long balls over the top, it was always a big shout of away because it was the easiest thing to do. But no, it was really odd night.
It was incredibly bizarre because we scored and I didn't see the ball go in, and half the crowd didn't because you couldn't see the other end. I think we went 1-up, and then I think they equalised. I don't know whether you saw them actually score the goal past you, but it was incredibly bizarre. We all exaggerate, don't we? But it was a night where you couldn't see the other end of the pitch.
I'm going to say it was the best goal I've ever conceded.
How long did it take you to get home?
Probably longer than the first half.
Yeah. It took me an hour to drive 3 miles home. Couldn't see a ruddy thing.
Yeah.
Couldn't see a ruddy thing. Anyway, so all good things come to an end. And we were talking about professionalism. So you now are going to cross the Trent. So having come down the A60, you go into Forest. How did that come about? Because historically, there are not too many moves from Notts to Forest.
No. You have to forgive me, I forgot his name. He was assistant manager for a while, maybe with Gary Brazil, and he was assistant manager with David Platt.
Dennis.
That's it.
Yes.
Den went over. He was a funny guy, by the way.
Yes,
really funny guy. He used to recite the England World Cup team, the World Cup winning team, but he would address us. So I'd be Gordon. Or Banksy or whatever, and he'd go through our team styles, whatever, whoever, and he'd quote him, and he said, "What's all this about these new fandangled modern names? I'm not having it. And he used to call people Albert and Derek and all these traditionally old names. So he was a funny guy though. But obviously he'd gone over, and David Platt taking him in as number 2, and I think that was the connection. Obviously, Dave Besan, I think it was, had left and gone the separate ways. So I went in, and another challenge, another step up in sort of standards, and another opportunity to try and prove yourself.
Because it's interesting, and I've worked in professional football for quite a while, so I understand it. But as fans, we always think, how can players do that? But of course, it's a business, it's a profession. Forest are a bigger club. It's a step up the professional career for you, isn't it?
Yeah, as I said, I alluded to it earlier. Yes, we all want to be the best we can be. I mean, locality-wise, in terms of I could still live at home.
Because you're a workshop boy, aren't you? Workshop lad. Yeah.
Workshop lad. Under Colin and Steve, though, so we've all heard of relocation packages in players' contracts.
Yeah.
And for me to be able to access my relocation package, I had to live within a 20-mile radius of the football club.
Right, yeah.
So I went halfway house. I bought the first ever house. I bought it in Mansfield. It was right on the edge of that 20 miles. But it was on the same estate that Andy Legg lived in. So I had a little school to share the driving responsibilities in with Leggy. So we got on really well. But obviously moving to Forest, I still live at home. When I actually moved to Forest, I think I moved back to workshop at this point. We've just recently started a family. My eldest now, Reese, was our firstborn. So we had our family and support networks around us. Obviously, a lot of help for Nicola, as obviously we travel a lot and the commute, however. But so from that point of view, obviously I got a better wage, and beyond that, there's a security of a 3-year contract. So all of it tied in, it was for me a wonderful opportunity.
How did you enjoy? What were the differences between Notts and Forest? Notts are a challenger club, a smaller club. Forest are a big club. Did you notice any difference in expectations, or was it all just taken in your stride?
Good question. I think obviously traditionally Forest have had the European success, Brian Clough and all that goes with that, and the pressures of aspiring to replicate that success. I think Paul Hart, obviously David Platt signed me.
Yeah.
They took my contract on from the end of the season, so I was kind of, although my contract was still going at Notts, it was Forest that was paying it. So come July the 1st, when the contracts all kick in, I sort of rolled into my new contract at Forest. So David Platt signed me, and in pre-season, the very first pre-season, England under-21s came calling, and off he popped. So that's when Paul Hart got the nod to come from the academy. And again, similar to Colin and Steve at the beginning, he had to sift out what he felt was not the future of the football club. So all them players that needed to leave, and you had sort of like Andy Johnson, for example, in midfield, players that traditionally had earned a decent crust at Forest, and the remit he was given, it was to reduce the wage bill and bring this current crop of youngsters through. So all of a sudden, that expectation level, although it was still there, it was kind of like there's possibly a ceiling to it to an extent, because it didn't have all these Italians that David Platt brought over, and we weren't drinking wine at lunchtime anymore, and we didn't have them little bits, laid on a plate for us. All of a sudden, it was right. We're going to play this way. It's the Forest way. It's the Brian Clough way. It's the traditions that have stood the club in good stead, and we want to go about it to develop these players. And when you consider the nucleus of that young group that came through, when you think of Dawson and Jermaine Genus and Andy Reid and Marlon Harewood and David Prutton So they went on to have a wonderful career. All of them had wonderful careers, really. So I think in terms of the expectation, I think it was like almost a period of settling, really, for the younger. The manager would want success, understandably, but with the constraints and the restrictions he had in terms of reducing the budget and investing in the youth and the development, because ultimately, I think, well, we've seen it since, Forest have also been a selling club to an extent, in terms of JJ going, so Newcastle, and you've got Dawson and Reedy and Spurs, and Crooks moves on, and so on and so forth. So even when we just fell short against Sheffield United in the playoff semi, if we'd have kept that team together, and you add into that Ricky Shimika and David Johnson, and you know, like the senior pros, that was really the glue that held it all together. But that was all kind of disbanded. So Jimmy Brennan and Matty Louison, and they're off to Norwich, and so on and so forth. And of course, managerial changes again, and all of a sudden you're chasing your tail a little bit, because everyone's having to rebuild and start from scratch. So all the younger kids that, I say kids, most of them on telly presenting Match at Day these days. But I think basically, was it Joe Kinnear that came in afterwards?
Yeah.
You know, they start again and again, a different philosophy of how they want to play the game. So that means different staff and different messages. And these players aren't good enough. They're not my players, so I want these players. So again, the turnover, and it's just been unfortunately for Forest, it seems to have been a continuing sort of theme, really, and they've never found that magic, that sprinkling of gold dust to enable them to reach them dizzy heights.
Now, you went on and completed a very successful playing career. You've now forged a successful career on the coaching side. I think a few years back, I sponsor the Notts County Ex-Players Association for my sins, or my company does. And you were invited back to get a special merit award, weren't you? And you came back, and I recall, because it's not easy, you actually had a prepared speech and everything that you read out to everyone, didn't you? And you conducted yourself very professionally and very, very well. Thank you.
Yeah, no, obviously, when you're contacted and you're told that you've been put up for this award and would like you to come to this dinner, so on and so forth. I mean, why wouldn't you not prepare it? You know, it's a wonderful honour. Obviously, the Ex-Players Association's a wonderful thing that they've got going on there, and we still have a WhatsApp group that's open to everybody to interact with one another, and you see goodwill messages for the playoffs last time round, and bits and pieces like that. And of course, some of the members are a little bit older than others, and then obviously others fall into ill health, and it just keeps people up to speed and keeps their ear to the ground. And I think I spoke earlier about that family, the unity that the club, it's always had that. It's always had that warmth and openness. And I think that continues within the former Players Association, whether it's in golf days or dinners and functions. And I think to get invited back and to accept them awards like I did, I think it's probably only the right thing to do. And as I say, real warmth, and it certainly makes you proud to think back on the moments.
Yeah, you conduct yourself extremely well, and I think, to be fair, that Brian Bates, Les Brad, Colin Slater run one of the very best former players associations of all. I was going to say 92, but you've got to have the National League clubs in now, haven't you? Of the 108 or whatever it is that are out there. And when I was at Leicester, one of the things I did with Alan Birchinall was set up a big Leicester City Ex-Players Association, and we had a golf day. First golf day we had, and Gary Lineker came up, which I thought was great. Came up with the ex-Leicester, loves a round of golf, came up to play. And I think that's important. It's an important part of fabric of the club. You know, clubs are nothing without players and fans.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Just before we go, just want to get your views, because you are now actively involved in goalkeeping and coaching. One of, I guess, the biggest sea changes in goalkeeping has taken place over the last, it's probably longer than we think, 2, 3, 4 years, with goalkeepers now expected to have outfield skills. And Cruyff turns, unlike a rarity in the 1996 playoff final, with Mark Stallard bearing down on you. You know, you look at people like Ederson, And it's become a massive part of the goalkeeping armory now, hasn't it? What's your take on that?
Well, I'm going to say it probably started probably a couple of decades ago. I think with the changing laws when it came to not being able to pick a throwing up, or when the goal kicks, you used to be able to pop it to somebody at the end of the box and they'd tap it back and be able to pick it up.
Yeah.
All about time wasting and killing the game and managing sort of issues in games, whether you're running the clock down or whatever the situations were. And I think obviously FIFA have tried to speed the game up, and it's evolved from there really. And of course that back pass rule, it put an end to a lot of goalkeeping careers.
Yeah.
But I think over that, I'm going to say 25 to 30 years now, since these rules have started changing right at the beginning to where it is today, I think a lot of the younger goalkeepers have been born and bred with it. That's what they've always done. So I think the standard is always going to be improving. It's always going to be better. And I think the inclusion of outfield players and I'm going to say the education system in terms of going through the grassroots and level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or however you perceive that to look like. I think that inclusivity in terms of goalkeepers, because it's all well and good saying, right, the goalkeepers are over there, they're having a fiddle with football, they're playing catch again. Well, we need them for a shooting drill. Over you come on, let's go. It's not so anymore. So there's a lot more in terms of unit work and working specifically on possibly playing out from the back, or it's building them relationships with your defence, or whether it's a 4 or a 3 or a 5. How does that look? And then, of course, the interactions with the possession drills that the players do, and all that goes with it. I mean, I've seen some drills where the goalkeepers, they're not allowed to use their hands, you know, in terms of like the gloves are off and they're one of the players. So whether you interact that as a goalkeeper as an extra session and they go and play with the under 23s in the afternoon because they've not managed to do it in the morning with the seniors, go and play as an outfield player, because the tools of the trade, the spatial awareness, the angles and depth of support that you're after in terms of making the pitch big, or you're offering safe side so you might play into a front man. And I know the goalkeeping coach England, Tim Dittmer, who's put like a goalkeeping DNA together. So particularly important is, so for example, let's say playing out from the back, so you can play the short pass into your defenders, you can play into your full backs where you might have to go over the attackers, you might play through the first line of their defence, which is invariably attackers, into a midfielder, you might go into a centre forward's feet, you might stick it into his chest, you might give him an aerial duel that you're giving him safe side of the centre half, so all of a sudden he's giving him best chance to win that first one. Or you mentioned Edison, he can boom it right in behind, so all of a sudden he goes beyond everybody and Sterling's in on a 1v1. So all them different sort of terms and that terminology and the definitions within it, all of a sudden England's DNA is there for everybody to see. So when I've got young goalkeepers and I use say Dean Henderson in the last couple of years that we've had from Manchester United, and he's going to England under 21s, and we've now got Aaron Ramsdale, very, very similar sort of career path and this pathway. Aaron's going, and I'm liaising with Tim when he's away, and he's done brilliant today, and his appreciation of playing onto rather than into, or his penetrative passes through, and all that terminology we get to understand. So as I say, going back to your question, people are starting to, it's becoming the norm, it's become the norm. And without them, I'm going to say, outfield playing skills, or the appreciation of how your team plays within that framework, it's just become very much the norm. And without it, you haven't got a chance.
Interesting insight. Let's just finish. You weren't necessarily the biggest goalkeeper. You weren't the 6'4", 6'5". Were there any real tough centre halves or centre forwards when you were in them lower divisions who you thought, I might get clattered here, you know, I'm in for a bit of a battle this afternoon?
Yes.
Go on.
I would say most Saturday afternoons I was targeted. I think you're right. I think I had plenty of spring, but obviously at I'm going to say 5'11" and 3/4. Should we round it up to 6 foot?
6'1". Yeah, why not?
Happy days. Yeah, I'll take that. But I remember there was a centre half, particularly at Wickham, and I remember his first name Kevin. And I can't remember his surname, but I've got a feeling his initials were KK. Something in the back of my mind. But he was maybe 6'5" and 4 foot wide. And I remember it could have been I don't know, it might have been remember Paul Simpson, Simo.
Yes.
And he floated this corner over. It had no pace on it whatsoever, and it like a feather. It was going under the crossbar, and I'm thinking, no. But of course, it's in your territory, and you feel as though you've got responsibility of the team to try and do something about it. Well, big almighty shout of keepers, and the next thing I remember, I don't touch the ground before I hit the netting at the back of the goal. This big centre half come flying through me. I had no intention of heading the ball. It was like a steam train. It just ran straight through me. And as I say, it shook every bone and joint and cracked everything going in my body. And it was just, oh my goodness me. And that one particularly sticks out.
What were you like with penalty saves? Did you study the art of trying to save penalties, or?
Well, not in as much detail as we do now. I think there's a lot of analysis. There's a lot of videos, whether you go on the software that all the clubs use, or whether you can pick up bits on YouTube or historically what they're, and you can look into patterns, you can look into traits, and you look at pressurised penalties, you look at the last penalties. There's all these little bits, and sometimes it's pot luck, and ultimately, let's not forget, it's called a penalty for a reason. It's a penalty. So you're not expected particularly to save it. But I think looking back how we did it, or how I did it, a lot of it, especially at the lower levels, I think a lot can be dictated to by the body language. So I always used to try and study as their approach to the ball. So it sounds quite simplistic really, but if it's a straight run up to the ball, I feel as though they're not going to open the body up and pass it to my left. So I think they're going to go a little bit more firmer, and they're going to put the foot through it. The chances are it's going straight down the middle, or they're going to drag it, which will end up being to my right. So if they've got more of a wider and an acuter angle to come up and deliver the ball, chances are they're not going to have the courage to turn the foot on it and give me the old, I'll give you the eyes, and whip it the other way. So they end up passing it to my left. So I think a lot comes from body language and run-ups, and as well, I think I spoke earlier there about pressurised penalties. Scenarios, situations in games. If they're chasing a game and they're in the 89th minute and they've got a really wide run up and they're losing 1-0 and they need it to secure a point, chances are he's going to go for the safest option. And if you can read into that and check into his body language and just his approach to the ball, I think there's an opportunity there to try and be the hero. So I'm going to say I enjoyed the moments in terms of saving penalties. John Doolan against Mansfield Town springs straight to mind. But there was another one, I think possibly against a fellow called Stuart Pearce at the City Ground in going back to the County Cup games at the Trent end. So yeah, there's a couple of fond memories from penalty saves. But that was my analysis of it at the time.
Darren, thank you very, very much indeed for your time. It's been very enjoyable. It's been very informative, very entertaining. All the very best for the season. Give our best to Chris Wilder. If he ever wants to come on and talk about his high spots playing for Notts, and there weren't many, were there, in his season and a half, we'd love to have him on. But, I fully appreciate it wasn't quite as successful as your time at Notts County. So thank you very much indeed, Darren, and all the very best for the season.
Nice one. Appreciate that. Thank you.